wait for us to see the stream.
My avatar here is one of the slides from our debate that so triggered Smokey Saint. He still has nightmares about that slideshow. He still mentions it from time to time. You know, when he gets really angry, but he's PTSD about my slideshow.
Hey, sometimes facts can trigger that.
It hurt. The truth hurts.
And we are live for tonight's Midnight Ranting. Tonight, we are going to be talking about the mystery of the gaps, or rather, the God of the Gaps argument. I'm joined with James W.
Hey, how you doing, Amy?
Not too bad. I'm excited. And so I'm going to do my little opening, and then I'm going to hand it off to you for your opening, and then we can have both some lively discussion. If anyone comes in chat, that can be exciting too. We'll see what happens.
Absolutely. Bring it on, Amy.
Okay. So, hello everyone. For tonight's topic, we're going to be talking about what I call the mystery of the gaps, or how superstitious belief likes to hide at the frontier of where science is exploring. Charlatans will use the so-called mystery surrounding highly technical concepts to come off as divinely inspired. The most popular versions of this fallacy is the God of the Gaps, though we could call it the God is the hide-and-seek world champion fallacy. Not only does God apparently not want to show up for empirical testing, but the further away we get from these claims, the less people seem keen on coming back from the dead, or any other miracle claims from any other prophets of God. So instead of finding credible evidence for their claims, what believers of their respective faiths tend to do is look for ways to pigeonhole science, hoping with bated breath that if they can disprove a well-known scientific theory, that their God will have been proven and Santa will save Christmas. This is not how science works, nor would it show any connection to a deity. Thus, the topics I'm going to discuss only have a connection with theism because the theists themselves have taken stake in them. We'll start with evolution, since theists spent millions of dollars funding both the creationist and intelligent design movement to counter the cornerstone of modern biology. The subject seems to cause the most confusion from six-day biblical literalists heard screaming, "Are you telling me my mama is a monkey?" No, little Johnny, we're apes. You are just one of the special ones that gets to ride the short bus. This shouldn't even be on the list, because the theory of evolution is a framework of facts, meaning genes randomly mutate and the environment naturally selects for them. One of our most well-known theories in science, like the germ theory of disease or the theory of gravity. That wasn't until lately. How exactly does a flat earther make moving water not fall off a flat surface? Never mind. Some of the more sophisticated theologians will try to use genetics to prove some sort of watchmaker argument. After all, if we're strolling on a beach and saw a watch, wouldn't we assume a watch has a watchmaker? Well, if a god made everything, then isn't every object in the universe their creation? The sand is a watch, the ocean is a watch, and the watch is a watch. Great. Now we have a bunch of watches next to a large watch. Sounds very watchable. However, it doesn't sound very scientific. In fact, we separate the artificial, like cars and trucks, from the naturally occurring, like tornadoes and your stepmom having a baby. Though where life began is what we really want to talk about. Once we get to self-replicating molecules, we begin to talk about the origin of life, or what we call abiogenesis. Abiogenesis is the process by which non-life became life. An event, or more likely multiple gradual events, which took place over a period of time soon after the Earth began to form 4.5 billion years ago, or roughly the age of everyone's gym teacher. Now, most theists at this point are screaming that life cannot come from non-life. Even when the Judeo-Christian mythos will have us believe that this deity made life out of clay, like Patrick Swayze in Ghost. However, like all claims, that would need to be demonstratable. Instead, there are plenty of reasons as to why life naturally arose on this planet. First of which being that the Earth, Moon, and Mars are with a habitable band around the Sun, which can sustain liquid water. We call this circumstellar habitable zone because most of the universe has temperatures which are either on fire or more frozen than a Disney princess. This allows conscious creatures like us to exist on the face of the planet before the UV rays slowly burn us to death. Another controversial topic, since theists want to give consciousness some sort of special properties. So much so that the entire deity seems to wrap around the premise that there can be thinking agents existing outside of time, space, and the physical brain. I'm going to shortchange this line of thinking right now. Our bodies have a job for us to do, and it's collecting food. Anything else is for us to decide, because getting rid of food and dragging us down to sleep comes naturally. And we're lucky to even get this life, even though sometimes nature throws us around like we're in a broken washing machine. Because in the small amount of time, we can make connections, give to charity, and annoy others. However, before I conclude, come with me to the beginning of the universe. We're starting to think deeply now, and we can see the vastness of 13.5 billion years pass by us. Hubble was the first one to take this journey, as he saw into his telescope that almost every major object in the night sky shifts into a red frequency moving away from us. Thus we can travel this path billions of years back through light. So here we are now, at the Big Bang, when everything we know was in a single point. Now many will ask, why did the universe start to expand? Well, we don't know. And we don't even know if it's possible to answer before the start of the universe, because that question would have to assume something before time and space. Now the theists will go, aha, there could be a God hiding behind door number 2. Though I have another explanation for concepts existing outside space and time. Non-existent. If we've gotten this far, the theist is normally scrambling to challenge all of logic. This is where the presuppositionists come in, who preach because they know they have no evidence. I mean, why is a hammer a hammer? Maybe I'm just a brain in a vat. Why should minds of fizzling soda care about morality? Nowhere in this gaggle of pseudoscience and mock philosophy have we ever touched the subject of an all-powerful creator of the universe. If we're lucky to talk about miracle claims at all, a theist standards of evidence drop to the depths so low that they reach their own hell. How does this God exist? What is this God made of? What are the mechanisms of their powers? And that's before we even get into specific stories, like making a woman out of ribs or drowning entire planets of people and starting over, like Yahweh's taking 2 on a director's cut. If Jesus is able to come back from the dead, then I'd like him to share his magical powers with the rest of us. Because the last I checked, there were still people somewhere on Earth getting their eyes eaten out by flesh-eating viruses. So everything is peachy, as long as we get the stuff, our fat faces. On Krista, we stole this from pagans. Mess. So do the mysteries of the universe prove a God? No. But when we substitute a deity as the solution, we stifle our journey in finding any of the actual answers. Instead, we should refrain from holding belief until the preponderance of evidence for a claim is overwhelming. Thank you.
Well, Amy, you brought up a lot of interesting points on that one. You put a lot of thought into this this week, apparently.
Yeah, it's just, there's so many, and it's anything but talking about their own God. That's all I can think about last night.
Well, this week we were treated to, we got to see a Matt Dillahunty debate, and we got to see a debate with Sal versus T-Jump. And the Dillahunty debate, for those of you who watched it, was pretty, I mean, of course, Matt Dillahunty won the debate clearly. The other guy's whole spiel was basically, it would really suck if there wasn't a God. Life wouldn't have meaning. Life wouldn't have purpose. Therefore, I really, really want there to be a God. So therefore, there really, really must be a God. Just because you really want it to doesn't mean that's the way that it is. And then we had in the Sal debate, which is kind of got our minds flowing towards the God of the Gaps being a starting point for tonight's discussion, because that was basically where the entire debate stood around. God of the Gaps. There are things we don't know. There are questions still to be answered. And then, of course, we step in right next to that with the argument from incredulity fallacy. And that's to say, I don't think that science or naturalism on its own will ever be able to solve any of these problems. Therefore, God. We don't know that science will never be able to solve these problems. In fact, science so far has solved every single problem with pure naturalism. It's never found any type of magic. It's never needed magic of any kind. We've never come across anything that we just couldn't explain, and we needed to invoke a god. But if you want to bet that origin of life, origin of the universe, that's the exception. We've chased God away from everybody else, everywhere else, but you'll never be able to chase him away from those two. Well, I mean, you could stick with that if you want, but I don't think it's going to hold up good over time. Humans have had superstitions. Humans have had questions all throughout time. And era, a lot of them really didn't have any good answers. If you go back even 200 or 300 years ago, uh, God was in everything. There were so many things we didn't understand in the natural world without a God. I mean, even in the age of sail, in the 1700s, which we kind of think is approaching the modern era, the sailors on ships, they used to keep the compasses in a special box called a binnacle. And that's because the sailors were afraid of it. It was weird. This thing that automatically points north. We have no idea why it always points one direction. It's it's freaky. It scared a lot of them, but it worked. So they kept it on the ships. They used it because it works. Didn't understand it. Scared the hell out of a lot of them. Uh, and they're looking at scientific theories like evolution, like the Big Bang, where there are pieces missing. There are things we don't know. There are open questions to be debated. And they're assuming that these questions in there invalidate the theory on its own. And then they're going to shoehorn in, you know, their Bronze Age book, which has a completely different take on everything. But what's interesting is you don't even really have to get that far. Because if you can invalidate their religion on its face, if you can show that it is completely invalid, then you don't even need to address any of these arguments. That's the beautiful thing, because I don't have to know exactly how a biogenesis happened to know that your solution, your God, does not exist. Therefore, we exist. So it had to happen somehow. And I'm guessing that they will eventually figure out that answer, but I'm content to wait and not make up deities to get around things we don't yet understand. And, and that's like our good friend Smokey Saint. He has a phrase that he likes to kick around called naturalism of the gaps. He's taking his own logical fallacy and trying to turn it around on us and say, well, you guys just assume naturalism will explain all these things. And that's a pretty good assumption to make, because it's always worked so far. It works 100% of the time. Naturalism works. Theism doesn't work. We've never had a testable prediction made through theism. We've had many thousands made through naturalism. It's just it's what works. I'm sorry, guys, if you don't like it. And I've said this before. If you just want to be a Christian and you want to go to church and you want to hold your beliefs, you know, okay, but what are you doing here looking into it? You're not going to like what you find, because the internet is where religion goes to die. This channel is where religion goes to die. And I think that's about all I have for right now, Amy.
And I would agree with that.
I mean, hey, but the debate with Sal was a good debate. Sal is he's a very smart guy. He's on a lot of areas. He's smarter than me. He knows a lot more about a lot things than I'll ever know.
Well, that's the most painful part, is that, obviously Sal, two things. Sal is a smart guy and a sweet guy, but he's one of the rare ones where I like James, not a smart guy. Well, it seems like he wants to, he at least is trying to learn. I feel like I've sent it. Is it not going through?
Oh, I hear you.
Oh no, I'm sending it because Sunflower wants to join. I'm trying to
Does
send it.
Sunflower want to get in?
I feel like I've sent it a few times. It's either not going or something.
So, I mean, Sal he's very smart. He's smarter than me on a lot of areas.
Well, and theists will often bring up, the guy with the highest IQ is supposedly a theist, and I think it's very easy. That's why we never make like low blows. It's why it's silly to try and say that theists are stupid. It has nothing.
No,
this isn't an intelligence test, because that wouldn't even be what we were measuring anyway.
It's someone like that he's wrapped up in his, and Erica, said this, and I found it to be true. You know, Sal has spent a lot of time defending these theories. He has a lot invested into it. He's got a lot wrapped up in it. And I guess if I had spent, 20, 30 years defending a theory, for you to just wake up one day and admit that, whoa, maybe this isn't true, is kind of a tall thing to come to.
It's a big deal. It can for some people, it can change their entire lives. And do you want me time to let Sunflower in? Have an open house?
Yeah, you can let Sunflower in.
Right.
Is he Sunflower in the back?
Oh, Sunflower.
What's up,
guys? Hey, son.
Not too much. How are you doing? Did you see the debate last night? Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Part of it, not the whole thing. No problem.
Okay, well, what were your thoughts?
You were in the after show, right? I saw Sunflower in the after show.
I wasn't.
Oh, okay. Did you eventually? I eventually. I think I saw most of it, and then I can't think I fell asleep.
And then it switched over to David Neff's channel. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I was in the after show on Neff's channel.
Okay.
Yeah. But interesting points you guys made in your openings tonight. I don't want to
Oh yeah, I'll take comments on either one.
Go ahead, Sunflower.
Okay. I mean, my basic, my most basic level of what came to mind would be like, I understand the scientific process, and as extremely useful. But what I feel like, what I sense is something amiss in the opening that you guys provided is like, do you guys think intuition is valuable, or do you think it's like some kind of like, amorphous byproduct, like it's some kind of weird mutation that we have, but like has no utility and should just be disregarded as like some kind of weird human like?
Well,
because I think it's the opposite. I think intuition is the most valuable thing, but it sounds like if you're valuing sort of naturalism in the scientific process, correct me if I'm wrong, you would want to like discard intuition at every chance you could.
Oh, no, I have a James, speak. I have a hypothesis of what intuition is, but
I just wanted to say, we're evolved creatures, right? So intuition is something that we evolved to make sense of the world, to be able to rapidly process information that could be very useful to our survival. The example is always given that if you hear something rustling in the woods or the bushes, it could be a predator. If you just say, I'm not going to worry about it, you're going to get eaten.
Right, but I would say that finding the watch on the beach is that there's, whether or not you explicitly, use that example, I think that recognizing intelligent design is an intuitive thing, as in people don't look at, like, maybe nowadays there's certain things they do look at and say that's intelligent design because I saw, an elaborate TED talk on how they made it. But on the most basic level, I think that we do have an intuition to distinguish intelligently designed things. And that's where I'm sort of having a hard time, because if it's like in your watch and beach analogy, if let's say like a advanced ape that has never heard of watches before, you're saying that this ape should have even if the ape feels like, oh, this seems like particularly more intricate and different than like the shell next to it, I should discard my intuition and view it as just a shell. Like
the thing about the scientific method is it works to try to filter out human intuition, because we can get things wrong when we're not looking at things objectively. And the scientific method, it works to nail each and every variable down to minimize that bias, that intuition that we have towards one thing or another, so we can see what's actually there.
And I love that when it comes to, sorry, one.
Yeah, let Amy do a quick response.
Okay, sorry, no, Amy, go ahead.
Well, no, so I think I know what intuition is. I want to build a synthetic version of it. I think it deals with I have this whole layer system, but I think it deals with sentience. And I think what your intuition is doing is you have a collection of memories with emotional attachment to it. Like, I did this, I ate this, but when I ate this, I really didn't like this. And you build kind of a repertoire. And as you go through life, it's almost like that gets compared with what the front of your brain is saying right now. You're saying, yeah, I'm hungry for this. I kind of want this. But you're saying my gut kind of says
more like
that it gives me
intuition, though.
You're saying,
because like I feel like
well,
instinctually,
I
not to like cut you off, but instinct to me is like more about what you just said, whereas intuition is more like a combination of instinct and sort of like special intelligence. Whereas like what you just described,
I'm very weary of that word. Let me tell you.
Fair enough. But what you just described, I don't see why there would be an issue in at any level of intelligence, a living thing having what you just described, right? As in, like, you could be the dumbest, like, intelligent life form on Earth and still have this sort of like reference of.
And you can have intuition. You're right. You can
well,
be.
But
that's because we don't. Because you value intelligence different than nature does. You value it as this like king at be all, and really, it just needs a bait. It's like it's like, you know, the Pi computer. A lot of models out there just need things to work. And, you know, we're out there. It's a common thing. We're like, well, why isn't everything going to the moon? And it's like, well, everything doesn't need to go to the moon. Everything just needs to survive like the next day.
Fair enough. That's fair enough. But what I'm saying is like, then I would just say that in your worldview, I would say intuition is a misnomer for instinct of just basically we're assessing the instincts of intelligent things and trying to give it a different category. That's what it sounds like you're saying.
See, and this just sounds to me like you're saying intuition can be wrong, and I'd agree. Intuition can be wrong.
And what do you think intuition is, Sunflower?
I think intuition is an innate sort of sense that is like sort of essential to the human species. As in, like, I know that I have it. I have good evidence to believe that other people have it, but it doesn't make sense to me from an evolutionary standpoint. Although I do believe in evolution, I don't like. There's a lot of things I can sort of account for in evolution, but to me, human intuition, feels supernatural. So I don't necessarily have an explanation beyond that, but that's what it seems like to me.
So you think it's something that it didn't evolve, that it's something God put into us to differentiate us from the other great apes?
I do believe that, yeah, but I'm not trying to sit here and tell you guys that like you have to believe that too. That's my position, but I don't think that like therefore you and Amy should also be compelled to that. That's just my position.
Well, I won't, but it still is helpful to hear what other people have to say and what they think. That's why we're here, right?
Right.
So then, Sunflower, where do you draw the line? Where is it to you? Because in my eyes, everything makes sense at a gradient. You know, different things have different intelligences. Predators tend to be more intelligent because they need to think things out. All that the herbivores need to escape. And so you see what the environment dictates. It kind of looks like a system where that would play out. Where exactly does like it go from like no intuition to where's that flip?
That's a great question, actually. Like, and so the thing that the example that always sort of stings in my mind is the example that when I witness self-immolating monks, and even to be more general, just humans that commit suicide, not to get too grim, but when I think about survival, things that evolved for survival, and then I think about something like intuition and intelligence being flipped not only to sort of like steer one away. Because some people argue that homosexuality is more of like some kind of population level, like trying to not have rapid overpopulation of the human species, which I'm not saying that I believe in that at all, but at least it would follow in the sense that it's not suicidal. Like gay people, they might not reproduce all the time, but they're not killing themselves. Whereas humans, as far as I can see, in terms of the self-immolating monks and the people that just outright kill themselves, this is so against anything that could ever evolve, for survival, that and not only that, but just the way I have intuition, the way I intuit things, it just feels in many ways supernatural to me. So I would say that that's the dividing line. Like when a trait becomes no longer about survival and actually in many instances causes the person to kill themselves, that to me is like a very stark line. So yeah.
You want to respond to that, Amy?
Well, there was different points. I'm trying to think which one to.
Well, there's a lot of things we don't understand about evolution. There's certainly aspects to it we don't understand. In fact, the self-immolating monks, that's something I've pointed to several times before, even I believe on this channel, in regards to Christians who will postulate the idea that the disciples in the first century, that they would be killed for their faith. Would they die for a lie, or would they die for something that an abstract concept like monks immolating themselves for war? There's always been war. There will always be war. There is war. But it's something that they felt strongly enough that they wanted to get attention for themselves, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's true in and of itself.
And I remember my point now, which was, can't we replace the word supernatural with awesome? Isn't what you're really saying? Because I have a concept that that I believe we have, which is called a brain bias, which goes back to the consciousness is so amazing, and it is such a awesome chemical reaction. To me, because I find a lot of wonder, because I get asked this by a lot of theists who think they're like, well, how do you find joy and wonder at all? And it's like, well, every day to me is truly amazing. And I think if we understand ourselves in the context of all other animals, plus all the other species that don't even have consciousness, that do their thing, I think we could both appreciate how amazing it is, and yet we don't have to go outside of the universe, because it makes much more sense when we can actually understand it in terms of a natural origin.
What I think will really help us out and will really open our eyes is when we finally do have contact with an alien world, and we get to see how like their history and how life evolved on their planet, and then we can kind of see the parallels with ours, and that'll probably help us understand a lot more, because we only have one example, right? And we're trying to make sense of it. But when you only have one example, there's got to be things that you don't really understand from that just one example. There are animals, I believe, that do engage in suicidal behaviors. I don't think, to me, for that to work, the animal would have to have true sentience, which I would say probably most animals really don't have that innate sense of self, that they don't really see their life as something that can come or go. They're just going through the motions,
See, before you go on, I would say what we're looking for, because it's the thing that we as humans tend to care the most about, is introspection. So I think, and I go over these layers. These are my 5 layers. It goes brain, mind, consciousness, sentience, introspection, and each one of those has different tests. I believe you can sum out like the mirror tests and Pavlov's and different ways that you can get to each layer. And I think, are cockroaches conscious? Yes. Are they sentient? I don't know. Are dogs sentient? Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Do they really have introspecting thoughts about their day? I don't know. I don't think so. But can you say that about a dolphin?
Well,
Dolphin, great apes.
But this is where it comes back to intuition for me, because when I see, like, I literally see a picture of a monk, like, in a cross-legged meditative position, fully ablaze and not moving. And then I think about the next most intelligent species, whether it's dolphins or elephants or dogs. Think about a dog saying, like thinking to itself, like, I'm going to remain perfectly still, display how calm I am, and just burn alive. Like, there's no, like, the ability to transcend, like, physical, sensory pain and anguish in order to sort of advance or further a political, philosophical, or ideological goal. I don't see that in any other animal besides humans, and that's what I think is sort of special about. It's not the literal suicidality, right? Because you could just say, "Oh, the dog is depressed; it's not eating; it died." Well, is that suicide? I mean, maybe.
To say dogs can eat. So generally speaking, if you leave out dog food, they'll eat until they can't eat, and then they'll throw up and they'll eat. So they can almost, you could suicide them by just leaving out food.
Oh, right, and that's what I mean. Like, so it's like if you look at humans that are either so depressed or just so maybe they have some sort of mental illness. But then there's also humans that don't have mental illness and they're not starving themselves. They just well-adjusted one day, self-immolating in the meditative position the next day, purely for the advancement of an ideological means. I don't see that in, like, dogs. Like, you wouldn't just expect your dog to, like, go into a cross-legged position and go and then, like, light itself on fire. Like, you're not a good dog owner. Like,
but you're complaining they're not having introspection, and they don't have. I believe this is another term. Once again, we have something called the narrative. We have something where we're constantly having a conversation with ourselves because we learn language.
Inner
they
dialogue.
may not. Inner dialogue. They may not have that, and without. Yeah, and Jason. Yeah, like Jason just said, primates probably do. I mean, I'm the closest thing to an animal. I view myself as equal to all animals. It almost pains me that I know theists look down on other animals as like this hierarchy.
Down on other animals. I mean, I look at them like I might look on an infant child. I don't look down on infant children.
Infant child. Okay, that's better than what I normally get.
Yeah, I wouldn't say like I look down on infant children. I view that their capacity is less, but I don't think they're like inherently not valuable.
They're humans. They're just not. They don't have maybe introspection yet. But
I say like a human child. I don't mean like I'm not equating them. I'm just saying like it's a similar kind of gaze, as in like I don't look at a like fly and go like stupid mere fly, stupid pathetic thing. It's like I'm like, okay, a fly is a fly. Like it has its purpose. It has its place. But I'm not like sneering down my nose like at like.
Well, everything we've seen so far, all the knowledge we have about the human personality, all of our actions, it all suggests that it's all hardwired in the brain. You know, that there's no external, there's no, nothing outside of that hardware. There's no like soul that where the real you exists. Like we see in older adults when they get older and their brain starts to break down, they don't function anymore. They get dementia, Alzheimer's, and that affects the whole thing. People with brain damage, that affects the person. They have different traits. They've been people who had brain tumors, and they started developing very, very weird, bizarre personality traits. And when the tumor was taken out, all that resolved itself,
Well, let me speak on this, because I think that the human condition is compatible with this, and here's what I mean. So my phenomenological experience is in my waking experience as someone who, like, I know this isn't a shocker, but yeah, I'm not of geriatric old age at the point where I'm experiencing dementia or anything like that. So what I would say is that all you need for the sort of infinite or timeless human soul is just any period of time in which there's a soul experiencing waking consciousness, and that soul feels as though they can act in accordance with God, that is, either make moral or immoral decisions. It doesn't matter if it lasts either a minute, an hour, a day, a year, 1,000 years, 1,000,000,000 years. If there's a period of time in which it exists and it transpires, that's all that matters. After it's like, at that point, I would just say, I don't distinguish if that person was killed instantly during that waking consciousness, or if they slowly decayed into a state where it was no longer present. That's not really an issue for my worldview in terms of the soul.
But see, where I see no positive evidence for the soul, to me, is that that's backwards. Is that we are nested under the body, and we like to think we're not. We like to think we're going to take these consciousnesses, and maybe they'll be able to do that. I don't even think, depending on how our brain is wired, that may be hard. But I fail to see where the body gets anything out of this deal. Like, part of what makes us so amazing is that we're alive. And I've been thinking about that a lot lately, the difference between consciousness and a lot.
What does the body get out of suicide?
What does the body get out of suicide?
Nothing.
I would say nothing, but the body doesn't have has a choice. But see, that's like asking the people on the Titanic. It's like being like, what do you guys get out of hitting out of this big freaking iceberg? And they're screaming. It's like, well, the body doesn't get a choice in this. It's just reality.
You're asking humans what they would do in the Titanic. The dogs don't kill the dogs in the Titanic didn't jump off.
But aren't you just saying we're so smart? Look at how smart we are. This goes back to just like, it's almost, we are so smart.
Our human, our animal. Yeah, that's supernatural.
Yeah. I don't see us like that. I see a lot of dumb people. No one in this channel, but
there's definitely dumb people. I'm not saying every single person is, has intelligence that's caused them to transcend their animalistic survival tendencies. But I'm sorry, when I see any act of intelligent, deliberate, an intelligent and deliberate action that seems to completely transcend and contradict all levels of survival instinct that preceded every species before humans, that's to me supernatural. And I'm not telling you guys you have to believe that too. I totally understand that you think there's probably a undiscovered natural explanation. That's absolutely fine. And that's why I'm glad we can have the talk. That's just my position.
I think I have natural explanations.
Like getting into the is there a reason for altruism? Like, how would that evolutionarily define, like, the evolutionary origin of morality and things like that? I know Amy's put a lot of thought into things like that.
Yeah, because I think there's a lot of good reason from a game theory standpoint for why there's altruism. Not only is it good for multiple players, but although some people, because everyone's like, well, what about a sociopath? Okay, they're sociopaths. But most people are hardwired when they pet a puppy or when they do stuff that is good, it naturally gives them a high in the brain. Also, I just want to clarify one thing. I think was a point we were talking. I can't even see it now, but primates, I just wanted to clear this because I think one of the tests for introspection is the mirror test. That would be my test.
Do they recognize that it's them? in the mirror, not just
Yes.
another animal.
Because it's the ability to actually look at the mirror and go, oh, that's me, and there is some stuff here, and then I can think about it and then use that data later to affect it. Try and maybe rub it away, or maybe you think it looks good, and so you leave it. But that takes introspection. I don't think we're the only ones who have it. I think you could say we're of a select club, or that we, I think, we could even say we do it really well. Yeah.
Well, I think as far as pure brain capabilities, I think the dolphin brain is actually built a little more efficient than our brain. The difference is that evolution has given us hands, evolution has given us legs, the ability to do things. Evolution gave them flippers and fins. They can't do anything but swim in the water. So they can't really use their brain power to build anything or to
do they ever commit suicide in order to further ideological?
I mean, whales do beach themselves. I don't know if they have politics or ideology, but I would say they do engage in self-destructive behavior.
Yeah, but the thing here is that we have a spectrum of. We can measure mental illness in humans, right? We don't just assume like it happens.
Kinda.
Well, kind of, fine, not perfectly. I concede that, but like when you see the person that's sort of like rocking in their chair and foaming at the mouth and kind of nonverbal, right? And then one day, and this is I know this is very cold, and I have nothing but sympathy for the mentally ill, and I'm not trying to be condescending at all. Let me make that clear. All I'm saying is that like there's warning signs, right? If someone's doing the rocking in place, foaming at the mouth, nonverbal, and then one day maybe they let's say they hurt themselves and they pass away. That would be seen as, in some ways, you could have predicted it. Okay, then the Wall Street guy who is nothing but making money and has a family and has a support system, and then one day he just jumps off a Wall Street building, and it's not even like let's say in this case he didn't even lose money recently, and it's like, well, what is this measurable, or are we just like in this?
Robin Williams, he committed suicide.
Great example. Yeah.
Had all the money in the world. He had a family. It doesn't really make sense to us, but he was apparently in his own private version of hell.
Yeah. And see, I can understand. At one point in my life, I had depression. It is a weird thing because to me, depression is about a very, very deep low. It's that everything in every instance, even while you're shopping and everything, it's a very deep low. I guess we are on this channel. Ever since, I would say there's two things that cured me of it, and I can't even blame one without the other. I wish I could blame one without the other.
Blame?
Yeah, that's funny. Villainous. Yeah, is being transgender, and so going through and being able to like the way that I look, and after that, I would even say the thing that it's very weird. I would almost say I can't be depressed. I'm sure once my parents pass away or something very sad happens, I will be depressed. But after having a rebirth experience on ayahuasca, it has been extremely hard to even be sad. I cried multiple times a week.
You went on ayahuasca, Amy. I've never heard that. All these times we've talked, and I've never heard you mention that.
I think you did hear me once, but you're like, we have to talk about this later. But yes, my roommate was a DMT cook, or at least one of my roommates at one point was a DMT cook, and she called herself a psychonaut. She did all sorts of other experiences, and she would trade DMT for other drugs.
Because I have always had a lot of questions about that. I've always looked into the use of psychedelics and DMT, and I've got some theories
Mhm.
about that. But we could talk about that maybe another stream.
Hey,
That would be interesting.
It's probably half of the reason that I'm so obsessed with consciousness, because I've taken DMT more times than I can think of, and I've had ayahuasca
Really?
once.
I usually hear
Yeah.
that at least the people that do it, it's like a once, maybe twice, and then like I've never heard of like
Well, exactly. But she made it every day in the house. And
wow.
so she would make it, and then we would do what she had left over. We called it grandma because it smelled it smelled like a grandma. And ayahuasca was the worst tasting thing I have ever
Yeah,
had.
I've heard like
Worst thing
ayahuasca,
ever. To this
peyote,
day,
the things like that are just vile tasting, nasty.
we had honey as a chaser, and I couldn't take honey. I couldn't eat anything honey. I couldn't honey flakes or whatever for a month.
Not to pry, but so I'm guessing that you did it in like the tea, like the drinkable liquid form, not the smokable form.
Yes,
That's ayahuasca.
It was some kind of tea.
Okay, yeah, I'm not totally familiar with all the.
And then the
No, you're
DMT
fine.
on its own, that's a crystalline substance, but you can't ingest it.
It was always yellow, but she told me it wasn't supposed to be that color. So,
well, I mean, I'm at the very least glad that you were able to find some level of peace and
exactly.
contentment. Yeah, like I mean, I'm a little bit apprehensive towards that kind of thing. I'm interested by it, but I'm apprehensive. But I find
me too, Sunflower. I there's a reason for that.
Yeah, but
it's a good idea
to hear from someone who's done it like a lot so many times.
See,
DMT is interesting.
Amy has like a somewhat of a different views on like the universe and things like that than I do. So maybe she would be more of a free spirit in that regard, where I would be a little bit more cautious.
Well, see, I'm a free spirit only with psychedelics. It's the funny thing. Once you start to do drugs, you realize, or take any form of drugs, you're like, oh, there's whole different levels. So I tend to like psychedelics because they can't hurt you physically. I'm not going to say they can't hurt you, but
right. When the drug wears off, you'll be the same. You'll be fine unless you do anything to yourself while you're on the.
As long as it's not yellow, right?
Well, no, you can take yellow. Just means that we were getting, I think,
something.
I'm trying to think what's the comparison. It's the difference between schwebweed, and really good weed. It just means she's not a great cook, or she's learning how to do it.
There's like a little bit of benzene mixed in there. No big deal. Just kidding. Yeah, I'm just being a jerk now.
No. And DMT's fast. DMT only lasts like 10 or 15 minutes, even though.
Yeah, I hear it's like salvia, right? It's one of those like it doesn't last long, but it's like one of the most. Like,
but from what I've heard, is it alters your perception of time. So when you're on it, it could seem like a lot longer.
Yes. Well, I've had one situation where all I remember is coming back from it, but I had one where it was like I felt like I left for 10 years. But it was like I was in a snowy cabin type situation, and then I just remember coming back and the feeling of being like, okay.
Would you compare it? Because I've heard, and maybe there's some misinformation regarding this, but and we don't need to get into whether or not it's actually true. I'm more interested in your experience, because some people say like, oh, DMT is created in the brain when you're dreaming. It's not like dream state.
I don't think that's true.
In your experience, is a DMT high similar to a dream, or how are they different?
Well, okay, those are two different questions. Does that happen regularly, and is that a similar experience? Because I don't even dream that regularly. I think your dream cycle happens most nights, and I think most people, it's supposed to forget them, but
depends when you wake up.
But the situation is very weird. It's almost unpredictable. It is the expression is like being shot out of a cannon, because it happened. You're high so fast, and then it happens, and you're having a situation, and things are going, and then you're back so fast, and there isn't really like it takes about that long to get out of it, and then you're back to doing whatever.
That's why they used to call it the businessman's trip, because you could literally have a business meeting scheduled in half an hour. You could take it, have your experience, be back, and be ready for your meeting in 20, 30 minutes.
And
Did they actually call it that? That's interesting.
Yeah, they called it the businessman's trip because it's not like a LSD or something like that where you're going to need several hours.
It's not like businessmen actually did it, but like it was in the sense that it comes and goes so quickly that like a businessman could do it. Okay, that
probably both, maybe. I'm sure some of them have, but I don't think it's like.
Yeah, I always hear of microdosing as like the entrepreneurial like sort of trend. Maybe
I've heard that with LSD, the microdosing.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I meant. But like in general, like I always hear like, oh, like, you know, in the Bay Area, like San Francisco, like Silicon Valley, everyone's microdosing. Like that's how.
Yeah.
You know, I've heard
like maybe 1/10, like what you would need for a normal dose, just
right.
a micro amount in your system, and you might see colors slightly differently, but that's the only thing you notice.
Right.
But,
that's what I've never done that either, but I've heard that's like trending on like tech, you know, people. Yeah.
Low-grade mushrooms feels like high-grade weed. And so it all falls on like the same kind of psychedelic spectrum. I would say ayahuasca is crazy because it lasts as long as something like acid. Mushrooms is kind of like the middle ground, if I had to put something there, maybe close to salvia. But the crazy thing with ayahuasca, and it made me a capitalist, but a
capitalist.
It made me love everyone. So my ayahuasca story is she gave me the chance, and we're like, okay, we'll sit down, and she drank this liquid, and like I said, it was the worst thing. We had like literal honey sticks, and we're like, oh my god. And she spent basically the entire trip complaining that she wasn't tripping. That's all I remember, because I guess she's a trip connoisseur. I was absolutely rolling, and my ego death happened where I saw a chair, and at that moment I wrapped my arms around the chair and I started crying, because I realized that every object in the room was made by someone, and I realized how much work it took just to make every day function. And I cried for hours over that.
Did you meet anybody on DMT or have any of those type of encounters?
No.
Yeah, okay. So you probably did maybe moderate dosing. You didn't really do heavy dosage.
Hey, you don't know, man.
I don't know.
For all what you just described sounded to me like a pretty powerful experience.
Well,
I don't know. Maybe
from what I've heard, though, when you get into the heavier dosage, you almost always interact with other entities on the
I've heard
DMT.
that, but I feel like if you expect that going into it, maybe that's way more likely to, you know,
maybe not. I don't know.
I don't know. I just feel like what she described sounded like what sounds to me at least like a very, very powerful, life changing. But then again, maybe you're right. Maybe,
well, it could still be powerful, just not
fair enough. Fair enough.
Hey, I would love to. I've never taken, because I've taken a lot of that. I've never, except for the trip with 10 years, which I don't remember a lot of the memories, which is what sucks. So it's hard to even, I question if it was, if it even happened, or do you just get the feeling of it happening? And so I don't know, it messes with your brain. But it's one of the reasons why I want to get I'm in support of people who have depression to take psychedelics, or at least a high grade psychedelic, because to me, I can't have my low peaks. My low peaks can't be anymore. If I could get sad, but I couldn't get depressed, because I understand. It sounds so quasi intellectual to be like, I understand now. but it's like even in the really sad moments of my life, they have to happen because they're part of life. The example is like my parents dying and things like that one day.
Yeah, it sounds like a real powerful experience.
Yeah, well,
life altering.
Out, but this has been surprisingly, really, actually productive and just overall interesting and pleasant conversation. So, sorry if I came.
Well, thank you, Sunflower. No, it's always nice to talk to you.
Hot off the whatever, like, but honestly, you guys really, this was surprisingly pleasant and very interesting. So,
well, thank you, Sunflower. Thanks for sharing your thoughts with us. It was it's nice to hear what people think.
Yeah, anytime, really, and yeah, just the way
we'll
you
probably
guys...
probably do this at least once a week. So probably next week, check us back out.
Very cool. Hey, I will chime in if I can. So
all right.
All right.
Yeah, have a good night.
Good night.
Well, that was a interesting conversation there. We got sidetracked a little with the psychedelics, but that's
a good conversation.
It is very interesting. I definitely want to delve more into that, maybe on its own.
Yep, it's part 2. I'll get even more personal because that's all I do. It's my channel though. So it's part 2 of my reason of consciousness is that, I have 2 major reasons other than the fact that consciousness is interesting. Maybe that'd be the third, but that's everyone's interested in consciousness. But the reason, 2 reasons I'm majorly interested is because of these sorts of psychedelic experiences. I think they knock off your consciousness a little bit and get you a little bit off kilter. And because of my epilepsy, I feel like I almost have a very good definition of what is on and what is off. And so,
well, yeah, it definitely sounds like a powerful experience. I've never tried it before, but I definitely have. I'm definitely curious about it. See, my theory has always been that even though I'm an atheist, I definitely believe that there could be realms beyond our realm that we see and we interact with that could very well exist that evolution just hasn't given us access to. Like the electromagnetic spectrum. I used to say it goes to infinity in both directions, but now I know that you can't have a wavelength smaller than the Planck length. So it starts there and it theoretically goes to infinity after that. And all that we can see and interact with is a very small slice of that called visible light. And there's very possible that there are things that exist that evolution has decided were not important enough for our survival to give us direct access to. They're distractions. They're things that, if we pay attention to, will get us killed in this realm. So, could they be out there, and could these drugs be allowing the brain to tune into these things that would normally be filtered out and experience things that exist but we're just not designed to experience?
I'd be open to it. I mean, I'm for funding, first of all, like programs like SETI and stuff. I mean,
absolutely.
I try not to do too much politics unless I could go a third position, but this is the rare. I mean, if I was in charge, NASA would get like a full 1% of our GDP.
It would go to like moon landing level funding, like that level of funding.
Exactly. And people will fight me over 1%, but that 1% would change our solar system, let me tell you.
Well, and because I've heard a lot of people, like when they have these, particularly DMT experiences with these entities, and they'll be in another place. They're not in the same room anymore, and they'll be interacting with these entities. And the classic idea is that these are manifestations of the person's personality manifesting as an entity, and you're interacting with an aspect of your own personality, but I've never really found that explanation to be satisfactory. And I mean, people seem to have conversations with these things, and they hear things that it just it could be coming from the person, but it just seems very unusual that it would be, from an aspect of your personality. And then sometimes they have hostile experiences with these entities where they'll be like, yo, what are you doing here? You don't belong here. Don't ever come back here. You're not supposed to be here. They'll be very hostile to the person and, trying to scare them from coming back. And then there'll be other experiences where the person's very welcoming and, oh, let me tell you about this. Let me show you that. Let me bring you to and see this. So, it does seem like you're communicating with something outside the mind, but I can't prove that.
Why? I will say I was reading in Sam Harris's wife has a book called Consciousness, and one of the things that happens in these psychedelic drugs is that it suppresses different parts of us and sometimes can separate them. So you could be consciousness, but you cannot have the feeling of yourself. And so those could be two separate things under this, especially, I think at one point it was saying it was suppressing certain parts of the brain, so that movement so you have just individual lobes talking, or all sorts of, I would say, interesting things happen on these psychedelic drugs.
It definitely is interesting, and that's one thing I've always said was, in terms of my views on aliens and whatnot, is that it is possible that the abduction experience might not actually be a physical experience with the body. It's possible that it could be an experience that is happening in a similar realm to like a DMT trip. And the similarity that I found with them is that people, a lot of times when people are abducted, their sense of time is very distorted. It's they'll be on a ship, they'll be taken here, taken there, what seems like hours or days, and then by the time they get back to their body, a very short amount of time has passed. I mean, could that be just a manifestation of the mind? Could it be hallucination? Could it be, an altered perception? Yeah, absolutely, it could be, but it's definitely one thing to just throw out there. One similarity.
Maybe we'll have life one day, synthetic life one day that can take drugs too.
Maybe. But yeah, it could be that one reason we don't see aliens all around us is, even though I think they're there, but one excuse could be that, eventually they'll evolve into that higher level dimension, and they won't need to interact in this three-dimensional space like we do so much. Maybe we'll eventually evolve there too.
I can give you my reason for why I think aliens haven't visited us, even though I know Fermi's paradox and all this. Even though it goes obvious, sometimes people will say that the probability is so high, and then some will go the opposite and say that how could it be this probability? But I'll try and let me try and bring it back. And so, in order for a species to talk with us, we first have to have we'll have another abiogenesis event somewhere else. So we have this planet that's starting to get the beginning of kind of like an RNA-like structure, and what happens is a mutation happens, and we get something finally like a cell membrane. So now we have cell membranes, and we're cruising along, and we can start to get interesting because now we have kind of like a thicker shell, and so that replicating thing can actually not get eaten by the lava activity that's constantly destroying the planet. So now we have semi-interesting single-celled life, and this will probably be, just like it is for us, the longest phase somewhere else. And for billions of years, you have these single-celled organisms, and what you gotta wait for some sort of symbiotic event to happen. You gotta wait for some sort of multicellular, either mitochondria, or I think it's chloroplasts. I'm trying to remember for the photosynthetic cells, and so from this symbiotic relationship, you get a whole new classification organisms. For us, we call that multicelled organisms, and so multicelled organisms start to make really interesting structures. And we're going along. We start to bridge out. We have plants, the first ones, and they get to sit still. And it's a good method of gathering energy because all they got to do is just defend themselves and gather from the source that's not going to go away for billions and billions of years. Now we have the leftovers of what's left. So we got fungi-like things and animal-like things. So the fungi-like things, they want to inject their stomach onto other stuff. We still haven't got anything conscious-like. We're almost there. The fungi are more closely related to us. And so they're injecting their stomach acid onto stuff. So we finally have animals. We get to this branch, the branch that we really care about. We're getting kind of moving things, and then you get like a predator-like thing, and then maybe like a predator omnivore-like thing is like, of all of the semi-smart ones, it's the really smart one. And then that really smart ones, of that, they get to start to build even some sort of civilization, and they go along and they're building civilization, and they're able to not kill themselves, and all through this, they're able to build a space program. And not only are they able to build a space program, but they're able to build a space program that's able to get through all sorts of paradoxes of getting out of time and space. That is why I think it's so hard for other creatures to talk with us. I don't think it's impossible, though. I don't think it's impossible, though. That being said, because we did it, right? We're on the verge of that.
You would need an environment where you had lots of planets around lots of stars and lots of time. Fortunately, we do have those three. It just becomes a matter of, we saw that we were able to overcome a lot of those obstacles, and it happened here. It would just be a matter of how hard are those obstacles to overcome. Is it something that eventually, given enough time, will happen, or is it chance that when we do branch out, we'll find tons of microbial life out there, but very little other life that makes it beyond that threshold? But I tend to be optimistic on that, so I do think that we will find life that does break that standpoint. In fact, there's a good chance they're already here. They're just waiting for us to be able to handle them, acknowledging their presence to us without us, blowing up the world or thinking that they're demons and, thinking the apocalypse is nigh.
Hey, I'd be open to it. Would you be excited if it was if we've just found single-celled, if we found alien single-celled?
Well, yeah, it would lead to the conclusion that if we have this, then obviously there should be more. But that in and of itself would still be a lot to study. We could look at how evolution works on their world and compare it to our world. Look at how their cells are structured compared to ours. compare and it would be a wealth of information.
And in fact, I'll bring it back because I was gonna to our main topic because I was gonna say it would be two abiogenesises, so you'd be able to study that and compare. And I was gonna say to myself or ask you, is it gonna change anything? But I already know the answer, right? They would just rechange.
I mean, these people are like flat earthers. At this point, they're like flat earthers looking at one or two little things with the globe and how that works that are unintuitive or that aren't easy to understand in the way of you could explain to a 5-year-old child, and then they disregard the whole theory because of that. But yeah.
Because don't you think it's interesting? Smokey and Maddox, I'll remember this for a while now. They both said, I asked them what would change their mind, and they said basically prove abiogenesis is natural.
Yeah, if you could prove it happened naturally, they would reconsider.
And they gave an answer, but it just seems like a very weird one to me. Even though that's like the what they harp on is all they care about is abiogenesis.
Would they ever accept any level of evidence as proof that would substantiate it? Probably not.
We would be filling a gap, right? We would plug that hole, and then just two other holes would come up.
Yeah, I don't think you could ever actually get them to agree that it had been proven and was completely naturalistic.
Which seems so funny. I get some people who will ask me, like, it doesn't really look supernatural and all this. I'm like, it really looks natural. Like, I am very confused. Like, I see 50% suffering, 50% people having a good life. So it looks almost, and everything in between. It looks almost exactly what you would expect from a natural. It doesn't look I don't want to say creepily naturally, that's poisoning the well, but it doesn't look really super shiny like you would expect it. Like if everything looked like a Ken house, like a Barbie and a Ken doll house, like I feel like there are expectations where we as agents would start to be like, isn't this a little bit weird? Isn't it weird that every time we eat food, it just pops back up? Like I feel like we could create tests and scenarios where it would look more intelligent design than this.
Well, I mean that's like Sal's thing is that when he got into the doctrine of divine hiddenness, that God specifically designs everything so that you cannot in any way empirically determine his impact on anything. That's why even when they get Christians, they get Muslims, they get Hindus, and they see how they're doing on, say, a disease, and they all get healthy or get sick based on roughly what you'd expect if there was no God influencing anything.
But that's basically cheating. If there were rules, it's basically saying, well, you know why my guy doesn't show up? Because that's the whole idea. He's supposed to be hidden. I mean, it cuts both ways. It's like evidence sometimes is a violation of our free will, and then not showing evidence is proof of his divine hiddenness. So Sal I almost thought divine hiddenness was a snarky term by atheists.
No, it's a doctrine they acknowledge and they pontificate about.
Well, I find that once again, I don't think I made this joke. I think I can't be the first atheist who said this, but they're playing world's greatest hide and go seek champion.
Smokey, he has his theory. I wouldn't say he has his excuses for it. That well, Amy, if God made his presence apparently known for all to see, then he would have to he would have to enact judgment, right away, because you would have no excuse for doing the things that you do that are wrong. So, therefore he is being merciful by hiding himself, because otherwise he would have to, he'd have to kill a lot more people.
But if you don't believe in him, he'll burn you in hell forever.
Right, which is, at the end of the day, I think most people would say, no, I'd rather be judged now and then him make his existence known, and then, like he did to the ancient Israelites, I would rather him be open about it, and then if people have to get judged, they have to get judged. I mean, what is that to him? He flooded the world. He burnt Sodom and Gomorrah.
And we get judged by other people all the time. The weirdest thing is it is my friend and my girlfriend in Canada is judging you. And we're like, okay. Prove they exist, and then prove why we should care about them judging us.
That's true. What did and then Maddox, he put out a video, our good buddy John Maddox, and he was talking about, it was a hypothetical, and he was talking about code and about genetic code, and he said, basically assume for hypothetical purposes that it is a code, and then how could it be derived from naturally? Not that it mimics a code or has code-like character, but it is an actual code. Then how could it not be divine? How would it not be intelligently designed? And I think when you make that assumption that it's a code, well, code would need a code writer. But when you have DNA, genetic material, which are chemicals that humans are then looking at and trying to make sense of, and then we develop a code to describe them, to describe how they work and describe how they function and how they interact with the other chemicals, that's a human construct that we're, using to make sense of the world.
Yeah, it's putting the cart before the horse. There was natural self-replication for billions of years, and then humans were around for 100 to 200,000 years, and then within the past 100, maybe past few thousand, if you want to go on code blockers and all that stuff, we've made artificial codes. And then, because we love doing this on all sorts of subjects, we then, after we artificially created it, we go, well, how can nature do that? It's like nature does it all the time. We disregard nature all the time. And, goes back to my artificial intelligence. It's just, they want to put consciousness above the body. And you're never going to have a strong consciousness if you do that. Part of what makes us strong is that we are alive. We are a living organism. Is that all of our cells are in for the ride and in the game. They have stake in this. And thus, they want to heal you because they want you to stay alive and collect them food. And none of it makes sense the other way around. More tangents on consciousness. But consciousness is such a... they focus so much on consciousness in a weird way. I find I'm one of the rare... not the rare atheists. Everyone... in fact, all of us are obsessed with consciousness. But I find that a lot of atheists and scientists and skeptics humble themselves purposely because we are sifting through it. I find a lot of theists attack consciousness because, once again, of the God of the Gaps, is because it is on the forefront. It is what we're learning. And so they try and, once again, door number 2. Well, if we don't know everything, then there could be a God. There could be a God. Well, we're never going to know anything. So please present evidence.
We're never going to know everything. And we know absolutely nothing with God. Everything that we've learned, everything that we know, we've learned by suppressing our intuition, like Sunflower was talking about. That's why we have the scientific method, because it suppresses those those aspects of our personality, our biases that lead us to fallacious conclusions.
And I would say the intuition is right a lot of the time. There's even good documented evidence that says your intuition is right most of the time. The problem is that when you need a metric, when you need a ruler to be more than just it feels good, then you can't get a double blind study unless you take intuition out of the equation.
Well, I mean, if we took intuition, Einstein, he came up with a lot of things that are very unintuitive about physics, and it seemed batshit crazy at the time to take Newtonian physics and say actually it's wrong.
And he thought his gut feeling. So here's two good examples. His gut feeling was right in general and special relativity, and his gut feeling was wrong with quantum mechanics. And he spent his whole life thinking, well, actually, I think he eventually proved himself wrong or right, whatever you want to prove. But he spent all this time trying to prove quantum mechanics wrong.
He eventually, I think, towards the end came on board with it, but he did fight it for a long time.
But it is an example of just, it doesn't matter. And you could say, well, what are you, Albert Einstein? Well, yes, he was. But it doesn't matter. That's the great thing of the scientific method, is it removes our bias and our intuitions.
Intuition, it's something that it seems like evolution gave us to be able to make split-second decisions on the fly, where you don't have time to sit there and weigh all the factors and weigh everything and give it a reasoned consideration. You just have to make a decision in a snap, or that tiger could be having you for lunch.
Yes, or I'll say even in, I would say, novel survival concepts, I would say the best example to me of getting into lay people's heads is, so you are in the drive-thru and you remember that you bought the meal before and you didn't eat, you only ate half of it and you threw it out. But the meal looks really good and the sign says it's only 50 cents more. So the front part of you, the part of your brain that is trying to process information, is going through all this and going, well, it's only this amount of money, it's only this. And your intuition, your gut, is going off past experiences and trying to say, maybe we shouldn't buy that. Maybe we had this experience before. Maybe we shouldn't do it. Now, it may be that you were really hungry that day and that you worked up such a hunger that you eat the entire sandwich and that you knew better than your intuition. And so it's not 100% right. So I don't want to completely shit on intuition, because I think it's good in the wild and it's good in our everyday lives, but we can't build a reliable method, because then it's just everyone's intuition and people can have different intuitions. I think we can build it synthetic.
No, go ahead.
It's just all this stuff I think we can build synthetically, and it creeps people out. And I either get to, whenever I go into all this consciousness stuff, which makes me think I'm onto something, I either get two responses. I get from atheists and skeptics, they're like, yeah, it sounds about right, and it's almost dull or boring. And then from skeptics, they look at me, or from theists, they normally go, no, it is special. There is something in there. There is a soul in the machine, a ghost in the machine. There is no. And I'm like, okay, but I don't see the special. What I normally get is, holy moly, we are so freaking smart. I mean, how can you put down how smart we are? It's like, I'm not putting down how smart we are, but I'll tell you, if your metric for a human is how smart, yeah, the computers are going to eventually beat that game out fast.
Absolutely. It's only a matter of time before synthetic life outthinks human life. It's almost inevitable, right?
Yeah.
So let's see if I had anything else here on my stack of stuff to bring up. I just saw a video on YouTube. Will you get in trouble for showing another videos channel? You better not.
Yeah, don't. I was thinking about that because I almost showed some videos about the God of the Gaps, but I was like,
I mean, I guess
who
if you're
knows?
if you're critiquing it, it could be fair use, but
I don't know.
Because
they were almost agreeing with me.
If you're critiquing it, then I guess it's fair use, or if you're adding something to it, but it at this point it might be better not to even risk it.
Yeah, or I guess get their permission or stuff. I know Modern Day Debate lets us, but that's because they're part of it. He wants to hand it out and stuff.
Right. I just saw a guy doing debate prep, or looked like he was doing debate prep for Maddox and Smokey by
doing another debate.
No, it's a guy consuming an asinine amount of vodka in one sitting, like inexcusable amount of vodka in one sitting, which kind of makes me think that he probably would be getting ready to debate Maddox and Smokey, because that is a fraying experience. Well, if there's anything else you have for tonight, Amy, I'm good.
I'm trying to think. I think it ended up being a good stream.
It was nice of Sunflower to get on there and give us something to chew on,
Exactly. I hope in the future we can get more theists on.
Absolutely. I'd love to hear more about why he believes what he believes, and if he has. I know we both have curiosities in that direction, so that would be interesting to hear from him about.
Exactly.
What is it so compelling about these God claims that makes you find them credible?
And hopefully why. That is the most important part. Because the what is easy. People are very good at telling you what they believe. It's the why they believe that tends to be the important part.
Exactly. That's the more interesting part of the equation. We know what they believe. We just need to know why.
And yeah, so did you want to do closing statements?
No, if I don't think I have anything left. If you want to make a outro, and then I'll see if I hear anything I need to chime in on.
Well, so in closing, tonight's subject was Mystery of the Gaps, which is really, for me, just a retitling of The God of the Gaps. A common complaint, I think, that theists think they get from us. But what seems to be the correlation, and correlation isn't causation, but what seems to be the correlation is that the farther away we get from these miracle claims, the less frequent they occur. Not only that, but the more recent ones, like with Mormonism and L. Ron Hubbard with Scientology, show the stitching much easier. Now, that doesn't make the other religions have any more evidence. Push the 2,000, 3,000-year-old religions. You won't end up with much evidence with anything but Kalam. But as we roll into each new scientific endeavor, I welcome the theists to, I guess, start more fun with each hole that we plug. And with that, James?
Yeah, I would just say, yeah, like you said, their standards of evidence are very favorable to their own claims. Things that happened a long, long time ago, 6,000 years ago, you can't ask for much direct empirical evidence because they don't have any. But claims that were made more recently, you would expect there to be substantiating evidence, which is why all the magic happened 4,000 plus years ago, where you can't really ask for any evidence, accurate historical evidence, eyewitness evidence, heaven forbid video or photographic evidence. So we'll just have to go with the Bible.
Hey, the Bible proves the Bible. Can't mess with that logic.
Yep. And the Quran proves the Quran, and the Vedas prove the Vedas, and yeah.
See? There we go. We solved all of the mysteries in one night. The answer is just believe all of them, and then there you go.
There you go. All right, Amy. Great stream. I'll see you next time.
I'll see you next time.
Thank
Night,
you, Amy.
everyone.
Have a good night.